Hello, everyone. My name is Laura Zarowski. I'm a writer and a photographer who lives in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And thank you so much for coming by our booth here at the Printed Matter Art Book Fair. And thanks so much for taking some time to watch this quick presentation about Pittsburgh's city steps and about the project that I'm undertaking, which is MisSteps, our missed connections with Pittsburgh's city steps. This is pre-recorded. The presentation itself should probably last about 15 to 17 minutes. So I hope you enjoy, I hope you find it interesting. And once again, thanks so much for stopping by. So let's get started here. So for anyone that's watching that is from Pittsburgh, that lives in Pittsburgh, that loves Pittsburgh, friends, family there, or if you're just Pittsburgh curious, a little bit of information about why Pittsburgh has so many city stairways. So Pittsburgh has one of the greatest changes in elevation of any city in the United States. And if you take a look at this map, you can see the city is located at the intersection point, the confluence of three rivers, the Allegheny, the Ohio, and the Monongahela. And all of the area that surrounds the riverfront and the rivers is relatively flat. However, once you start to move away from that, the elevation sharply increases. And in many places throughout the city, there is an elevation change that goes up to 660 feet. So there's a lot of variation between the city's highest points and the city's lowest points. So it is because of this kind of landscape that we have that really made city steps a complete necessity in order to move people around. So this is a more modern day map here that just shows the little red dots show the locations of where all of the city stairs can be found throughout Pittsburgh's 90 different neighborhoods. So of those 90 neighborhoods, 66 of them have city steps in them. The remaining neighborhoods are in relatively flat places along the waterfront. And the thing that's really fascinating about all of this is that because of that big steep change in elevation, it precipitated the need for over 800 distinct flights of stairways to be built in all of these different neighborhoods around the city. It's often considered the city's first mass transportation system. And that is because they were built in a period of time before we had the big highways, the interstates, the giant thoroughfares. Many of these stairs were built. Some of them actually date back to the post-Civil War period. None of those stairs exist any longer, but city stairs existed back in that time. People did start building them in the late 1800s. The ones that we see today, if you're in Pittsburgh and you happen to be walking around, you'll see these gigantic structures made of concrete and steel. And those primarily were built around the post-World War II period. There are plenty that were built in the decade before World War II, but a great many of them of what we see now were constructed or were rehabilitated immediately following the Second World War. And that was to accommodate the fact that in that post-World War II time, Pittsburgh was the 6th largest city in the United States, and we had over 700,000 people who lived and worked in the area. So those city stairs were really necessary to move all of those people who lived up in the hills down to the steel mills that lined the waterfronts. So, as I mentioned before, the city stairs date back well into the 1800s. And this particular flight that you see here in this old photograph is the Indian Trail steps. Now, this particular flight no longer exists. It was originally built in 1909, and it existed until 1935 when it was taken down. But this particular flight of stairs was the largest and the longest in Pittsburgh history. It was over a mile long and had over 1,000 steps. And it stretched from the south side slopes all the way up into the hills of Mount Washington and Duquesne Heights. And this flight was built following an old footpath that actually dated back to 1763. So it was a well-worn trail that people used to get up, to get down, to get up or down rather, from the flats up to the hills. And when I take a look at this, I often think to myself, wow, imagine, you know, you just worked a grueling 12-hour shift in the steel mill, and then you had to walk up this gigantic flight of stairs in all kinds of weather, blazing heat in the summer, snow in the wintertime, pouring rain. Um, and for many people, when this stairway was built, it was seen as such a luxury, such a relief, because what existed there before was simply a footpath that had been etched through time into the hillside. So if you can just imagine hundreds of thousands of workers, you know, every year traveling up and down this very long flight of stairs, you know, to go to work. So how do we know about all the city stairs? Well, thankfully, there are a number of historical records that exist, and the Sanborn fire insurance maps are typically a great way for historians and artists to see where city stairs were located back in, you know, the 1800s, the early 1900s, particularly all of those wooden flights that no longer exist. Um, the oldest surviving printed map that shows Pittsburgh city steps on it dates back to 1884. The image that's here in the slideshow is not that particular map, but you know, the 1884 date, you know, kind of solidifies, it creates a marker point that, you know, this is when the first map that the city, you know, filed for fire insurance purposes that showed city steps on it. Now, did city steps exist before that? Probably. However, we don't have any documented record of it at this time. So, as I mentioned earlier, so many of these city stairs were built at a time when Pittsburgh population was at its height, city was booming, and many of the working class people, you know, when we think about the earlier 1900s, did not have cars. So city steps that led to houses that were built on hillsides were not really seen as a problem for people, because people back then didn't need road access to their house. Having a stairway that provided access to your house was often more than sufficient. However, you can only imagine in today's landscape that we live in, where, you know, cars are much more affordable, people drive places, we have highways, we have roads, and also considering the fact that Pittsburgh today has approximately 300,000 people who live here, this houses that are located alongside city stairs that don't have street access are at a real disadvantage. These houses are called orphan houses, not because children who don't have parents live there, but rather because they've been orphaned from any road. And all they have is access by a flight of, you know, maybe somewhat wobbly, perhaps a little decrepit flight of city stairs. So unfortunately, many of the orphan houses are either in very, very bad shape today, or they've been demolished. There are some instances, there are some neighborhoods where orphan houses have been able to survive and they're doing fine. Typically, those tend to be in high density neighborhoods, where it's okay, you know, to park your car a little further away, or perhaps you don't have a car because you're taking public transportation. But for many of the other neighborhoods that had orphan houses, you know, things are just not in a good shape for them. And the case in point is with this image that I'm showing you right now. This is a Google Street View image from 2007, and it's the California Kirkbride neighborhood off of B Street. And this house and these stairs no longer exist. They existed when Google came out to take the picture, 13, 14 years ago. But in the last 5 or 6 years, this has all been demolished and this no longer exists. So it's kind of interesting also that Google Street View also provides some images, as a historical documentation of things that we don't see today, but we can go back to at least a more recent history and see what existed then. So taking a look at some modern day or more modern day stairs, this is kind of more reflective of what city stairways look like in Pittsburgh today. This is an intersecting flight, Fraser Street and Romeo Street. It's in Oakland, near the University of Pittsburgh, an area that has lots of students and young professionals living in it. And this flight is very interesting because it's two streets that intersect. So if you look off to the left, you see more railings that head up the city steps of Romeo Street, and then straight ahead, you're continuing up onto Fraser. And there are several instances of intersecting city step streets that are in Pittsburgh. But this one here in Oakland is probably one that's still very, very popular and used quite a bit today. This flight here is Diana Street, and it's in the North Side neighborhood of Spring Garden. And I think this is just a beautiful flight of city stairs. It's cantilevered, meaning that it hangs off of the hillside that is there. People, when they walk up and down this flight, they can get a little nervous because, as you can see, as you're going up the treads, you can actually kind of look down and see everything that's underneath you. But it's a really beautiful flight of stairs. And there probably, in Pittsburgh, there probably is about 25 to 30 of these large cantilevered flights that still exist. They're really beautiful. Now, I know I mentioned in the beginning that, back in the 1800s, all of the city stairs were made out of wood. And while the majority of them are made out of concrete today, there are still some wooden flights that exist. They tend to be shorter and in connecting different streets in smaller neighborhoods. So this particular wooden flight here is in the East End neighborhood of Lawrenceville. And if you look carefully down at the bottom of the flight, you'll see it connects to a street that is made out of Belgian block. There are a number of streets here in Pittsburgh that are still made out of brick and block, and they're really pretty fascinating to look at. And then this last example here is in the South Side slopes, another flight that's been built into the hillside. Now, one of the things that we do have to worry about here in Pittsburgh with the city stairs is because of the topography and that very hilly nature of the land. We are always fighting erosion. And so it is something that, due to the rain and snow and the melt and just gravity doing its work, what can happen is that the area underneath the city stairs can start to erode, and then that causes structural problems for the flight itself. So it is something that, flights of stairs are always in various stages of decay. And fortunately, those that tend to be very commonly used in neighborhoods where people rely on the stairs to reach public transportation, those tend to be given first priority for making sure they stay safe and easy to walk on. So South Side Slopes, I was just mentioning that last photo there. The South Side Slopes neighborhood is the neighborhood out of all the 90 in Pittsburgh that has the largest number of city stairways. There are 68 flights of stairs there with over 5,400 individual steps. Yardway, which is the longest in the South Side Slopes, and it's one of the top 5 longest in the city of Pittsburgh, has 317 steps. The South Side Slopes was once historically a neighborhood that was densely packed with people, families who worked at the steel mills. And nowadays, It's a neighborhood that's very popular with college students and with young professionals, given its close proximity to Duquesne University and also the University of Pittsburgh. And the Southside Slopes Business Association now every year has an annual step trek where people get maps and you go out and you essentially walk up and down flights of stairs every day. And when you make it to the top of Yard Way, you get to ring the bell and catch your breath. So all about my project, the MisSteps project. So how did this all come about? This all came about because 8 years ago, I moved to Pittsburgh from Providence, Rhode Island. And after living here in Pittsburgh for a little while, I realized I wanted to get to know the city a bit better. I was familiar with certain neighborhoods, but I was not familiar with all 90 neighborhoods. And there were lots of places in the city that I had not gone out to visit and I knew absolutely nothing about. So because I had that intention in my mind, I came across this book in a local bookstore called Pittsburgh Steps. And I was really quite fascinated with this book because I lived in a neighborhood that had several city stairs. And because I'm from Rhode Island and Rhode Island is a pretty flat place, I had never seen anything like this before. And so I became very fascinated with what these city stairs were, all of the different neighborhoods that they were in. And I thought, this is going to be a really fantastic long-term creative project that will allow me to combine my interests both in photography and with writing. And so I started this journey, essentially recreating the journey that Bob Regan, who is the author of the book, and there's his photo there off to the side. Bob Regan is really the person who's credited with kind of being the explorer who went out and mapped where all of the city steps were. Bob had come to Pittsburgh to teach at the University of Pittsburgh in their School of Engineering back in the mid-90s. He was from Boston, Massachusetts, and he was an avid cyclist. And so he's new to Pittsburgh, he's cycling around, seeing things, and he happens to notice, oh, all these city stairs, and was really kind of interested in it. And so he called up City Hall and the Department of Public Works and said, hey, how can I get a map where all of these city stairs are? They look pretty fascinating. And because he was an engineer and interested in things like this, he wanted to do some research and learn a little bit more. Now, unfortunately, in the mid-90s, Pittsburgh was not doing so well as a city. And the city had pretty much relinquished all care and control of the city steps. Depopulation was at its height. People had left, taxes were low. There was just not the money to maintain all those city stairs. And so unfortunately, there was at the time, no comprehensive map of where everything was. There were certain Department of Public Works maps, and there were some historical maps, but Bob really needed, if he wanted to find all the city stairs, he was gonna have to go out and find them. And that is exactly what he did. And on his bike, cycling all over the city, he spent the next several years kind of hunting down where all the stairs are. And the end product was the book that you see here on this screen, Pittsburgh Steps. This is the second edition of the book, and it is the one that is still in print and used by people today. And it is the bedrock of my project because it shows and tells me where all of the city stairs are and in the order in which Bob found them. So I go out and I kind of recreate the journey. And so over the last 3 years, I have photographed today of this recording 545 flights of city stairs in 60 different neighborhoods. I still have plenty to go, but there's been a lot of excitement, a lot of walking, and just seeing so many different neighborhoods throughout the city. And these are the Polaroids that I take. I use a Polaroid with Spectra film. And these are examples of the photos, some of my favorite photos that I've taken throughout the last 3 years. So because I'm a writer, the thing that I also do when I'm out visiting City Steps is I spend time. I spend time walking around the neighborhood. I walk up and down the stairs if the stairways are open. Um, and if the weather is nice, I just kind of sit and hang around and just kind of absorb the area. Sometimes I, come across people who are going up and down the stairs, people who are out walking around. I come across animals sometimes. Pittsburgh has all sorts of wildlife, deer and possums and, cats and all kinds of different things, groundhogs. And I just like to spend time in the neighborhood, just kind of soaking in the ambiance and thinking, well, seeing what comes to mind. What am I thinking about? And that forms the basis of the short creative nonfiction story that I write. And so I write and publish 3 stories and photographs every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on Instagram and on my blog. And that's just, it's such, doing this part of the project, the actual sitting in the place and spending time being a part of that little section of that neighborhood is really the most fulfilling and exciting part of the project. I mean, it's great to share things, and I love taking photographs, but it's really just sitting there and being a part and looking out over the hillsides, looking out over the streets and the houses that really inspire me. And so twice a year, in addition to the photographs and the stories, I also create with Jimmy Reardon, who's here at the Printed Matter Book Fair as well. We create risograph printed trading cards. Each little pack contains 10 randomly selected City Steps trading cards, which shows a risograph print of the Polaroid, gives you some information about the stairs, the neighborhood, where they're located, how long they are. And on the back contains the story that I wrote for them. And Jimmy and I, along with various other artists along the way, have now created 7 of these issues, the latest of which came out in December of 2020. The most recent issue, which is available for sale here at the fair and on my website, features illustration work by local artist Leslie Clegg. And this particular issue, because it was created when the pandemic and COVID-19 was, really raging through our country and raging through Pittsburgh, we also decided we were going to collaborate and come up with a poster called "The History of the People is Written on the Landscape." And that poster is included with this issue, with issue 7, and it can also be purchased separately. But I really feel that, COVID was and still is, such a destructive and horrible force for everyone. But I feel that, well, if there was something good that came out of all of it, that this particular issue and this poster is really something that I'm proud of. And it was a real bright spot in the months of uncertainty and anxiety that has plagued everyone. So if you are in Pittsburgh, if you're coming to Pittsburgh, if you know people in Pittsburgh, I encourage you to get involved with City Stairs. In recent years, since Mayor Bill Peduto was elected to office, I believe that was 6 years ago, there has been a new interest in making Pittsburgh a green, friendly city, trying to make things easier for cyclists and for pedestrians, and trying to, kind of reduce the reliance on cars. And so to that, there is a committed effort to trying to care for and rebuild city stairs that are in neighborhoods where there is development that's going on, where there is needed access to bus lines, and also just, interest in being able to transport people through different neighborhoods throughout the city. So this just shows a quick photo of a flight of stairs in the Hill District neighborhood in Middle Hill that I took when I visited there in October of 2017. And the photo on the other side is the newly rebuilt flight that was done by the city. And that was in July of 2019. And there are lots of examples like this throughout Pittsburgh. Every year, there are a number of flights that get rebuilt, and a number of flights, have construction done on them. And so it's really exciting. Not all of the 800 flights will be restored to their prior glory, but at least for those that are in neighborhoods that have higher density, that people are moving to, and that there's a commitment for development, the city stairs are doing fine there. And so that's something to be really excited about. So in wrapping this up, Pittsburgh is a big city geographically. We have all different kinds of people who live here with all different kinds of interests. But there's one thing that I think almost all Pittsburghers have in common, and that is that they love cats. And every place that I have gone as I have traveled throughout the city, photographing city stairs, there are very, very few visits when I don't see cats. Cats looking out of windows, cats following me on city stairs, wondering what I'm doing, cats just kind of hanging out on the sidewalk, looking for head scratches, and lots of people who do things like build shelters for the outdoor kitties. I do come across people with dogs every so often because, hey, dogs love their exercise, and going up and down stairs is a great way for not only for your dog to get some exercise, but for you to get some exercise as well. But I have to say, cats, I see so many of them. And luckily I'm a cat person. I think they're cute. And so that is the end of the presentation here. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks for coming by. If you have questions, you can email me. You can find me on the social medias, on Twitter and on Instagram. Or because this is being posted in YouTube, you can leave me a message here. But thank you so much for stopping by. I hope you learned a little something interesting about Pittsburgh and its city stairs. And please consider making a purchase here at the Printed Matter Art Book Fair. And once again, thanks so much, and have a great day, a great night, wherever you are.